A, we invaded Iraq illegally. There is no legitimacy to our presence in Iraq today. That underscores every discussion about Iraq. We violated international law. The president said there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, and the United Nations is unable or unwilling to fulfill its law. It passed a law saying Iraq must be disarmed. Iraq isn't disarmed. The president didn't tell us how he knows this. He just said he knows it. And because the United Nations is unable or unwilling to take action, the United States must. International law is not something we are bound to, he said, because international law is wrong here. The security of the United States is at stake. We can't rely on law to protect us. We must undergo modern-day equivalent of frontier justice. You know, frontier, it's apt. We're in a high school name. What is the definition of frontier? Frontier is that area between civilization and the wilderness. Frontier. You don't have pure civilized activity there. The rule of law does not firmly apply. You got some bad people running around. So frontier justice is a sheriff. Gary Cooper type. Tall, good-looking, straps on the guns, walks down the city street, takes on the bad guys. Boom, 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 boom. Was that the rule of law? Nope. It was frontier justice. Gary Cooper was the good guy. He had to deal harshly with the bad guys. But that's not what the president gave us. He didn't have the courage to strap on the 6 guns and walk down the street and shoot the bad guys down. He bushwhacked us. See, bushwhacking is another term that we have to talk about when we bring in the Western analogy, because it's the most cowardly form of combat that took place in the West. Far from the Gary Cooper staring down the guys in the street, bushwhacking is a coward hiding behind a bush shooting somebody in the back. And that's what the president did to the American people. He shot us in the back. He lied to us about a threat coming from Iraq. He lied to us about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Now, before the war, I can give excuses to people who said, Scott, you know, I heard what you said, I respect your position, I know where you came from, but this is the president, man. He's got the CIA on his side, he's got the DIA, he's got NSA, he's got all those alphabet organizations that are feeding data to him, and you haven't been involved in that since 1998. So I'm going to lean on the side of the president here. Okay. You leaned on the president and you found out that rather than a solid foundation, you had a house of cards that collapsed the second the first lie was exposed. Now what are you going to do? Now what are you going to do? Weapons of mass destruction in Iraq? There aren't any. How do we know? Even the Bush administration has to acknowledge they can't find them. 4 months and $300 million into a post-war investigation, they haven't found a single weapon of mass destruction in Iraq. They haven't found a single program dedicated to the manufacture of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. What they found, or what they have alleged to find, are fragments, bits and pieces. I've always said that since Iraq had a huge weapons of mass destruction program in the 1980s and early 1990s, that you got to view Iraq, when you deal with weapons of mass destruction at this late stage in the game, as a giant archaeological site. And you dig deep enough and you dig long enough, you're going to find evidence of these past programs. But you aren't going to find ongoing programs. Remember this, the president didn't stand up before us and say, we're going to war because an Iraqi scientist has 1 vial of botulinum toxin in his refrigerator that's been there since 1993. That's a threat to the national security of the United States of America that warrants the mobilization of 250,000 people. That's not what the president said. The president said, we're going to war because there are massive stockpiles of biological weapons, massive stockpiles of chemical weapons, long-range ballistic missiles, and a nuclear program that will manifest itself within 6 months with the manufacture of a nuclear device. And he exploited the fear and ignorance of the American people by putting his vice president on TV, who told us Iraq will have a nuclear bomb within 6 months. When asked where the smoking gun for this was, he says, we don't want the smoking gun to be a mushroom cloud. And the Americans quaked in fear in their seats at home, and they supported this war. There is no nuclear program. There is no chemical weapons program. There is no biological weapons program. There is no long-range ballistic missile program. There are no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Lesson 1, United Nations weapons inspections worked. They succeeded in disarming Iraq. One of the lies the president said is we have to rush to war now because we can't trust the United Nations to do this very difficult job of disarming Iraq. Ladies and gentlemen, they did a pretty darn good job. And I tell you what, I will trust the return of UN weapons inspectors back in Iraq more than I will trust David Kaye wasting $600 million more of our taxpayers' fund to continue this politically motivated witch hunt. David Kaye is not in Iraq to search for the truth. That's for sure. Give you one example of how I know this. It's his own words. 120 ammunition supply points in Iraq, he tells us. 120, and they're out there, all over the place. And we haven't even begun to inspect them all, he says. And some of them might contain chemical and biological weapons. Well, think about that. We went to war because of the chemical and biological threat posed by Iraq. We went to war to keep chemical and biological weapons out of the hands of terrorists. And you're telling me now that the President of the United States is going to sit back and do nothing when we suspect that chemical and biological weapons might be in an ammunition supply point? Because these supply points aren't protected. No American troops are there. They're open up. Paul Bremer came out, the head of the Coalition Provisional Authority, and said, yeah, these supply points, we've got to work on securing them. Some of those weapons used to blow up the UN headquarters came from these unsecured supply points. Okay, why aren't you securing them? We don't have enough troops. All right, conventional weapons, I buy that, it takes time. But now we're told that there might be chemical and biological weapons there. Why aren't we securing them? Because there are no chemical and biological weapons there. If you think for one moment the United States military would stand by and allow ammunition supply points that potentially carried chemical and biological weapons to remain unsecured in a nation like Iraq, which today has become a magnet for international terror? No. David Kaye is lying to us. He's lying to us. He's in there for political purposes only. He's in there to buy the president time politically, to spend the data in a way which continues to confuse the American people about the truth that is Iraq. We've been lied to, we've been misled, we've been deceived, and now we're stuck in Iraq. And there's not going to be any elegant solution in getting us unstuck. There's not going to be peace with honor on this one, guys. It's ugly. The only way we're going to get out of Iraq, and I'll give you an analogy so you can think about it. Iraq is a giant fire. It's burning right now. The fuel that feeds that fire is the presence of American troops, plain and simple. You want to put out the fire? Remove the fuel. Get the American troops out of Iraq. Now, you can't do that in a vacuum. You can't just snap your fingers, pull the American troops out, and expect everything to be rosy in Iraq. So there's going to have to be some things that take place. A, get the United Nations to step into that vacuum. Turn to the United Nations and give them the political control of Iraq that is required. B, turn the security of Iraq over to the Iraqis. Remobilize the Iraqi army that we demobilized. They're not all pro-Saddam supporters. They're Iraqi soldiers who will serve their country if called upon to do so. I don't want American soldiers doing over 900 detainments a night. 900 doors we kick down in Iraq a night. 900 men we roust out in front of their wives and children. We humiliate them in front of their family. We handcuff them. We beat them to the ground. We put a hood over their head. And then the next day, we return 896 of them back to their families because we didn't have anything on these guys to begin with. We hold 4 because we suspect they might be up to something no good. You know, we wouldn't allow that here in America. Why are we going to allow it over there? Why are we allowing American troops to do to the Iraqis what we would never allow our own police to do to us?